No way.
See you.
So,
Hey, how you doing?
hey,
Good to see you. Thanks for coming.
your marketing was way too good because there's 5 times the amount of people still outside. What are you going to do?
We cannot go outside, so basically they're closing the door. So guys, we have actually like too many of you love Demoscene. That's awesome. However, the room has limited space. Though, if you don't want to squeeze in, we have YouTube channel, so the session is video streamed, so you can go and watch in the quiet space somewhere outside, or stay with us if there is like room for you. So it's up to you. What I wanted to show you, if you're gonna go, so you can see your video stream, so I can see myself, and if you're gonna look for Demoscene Worldwide and ACM SIGGRAPH 2018, you can find the video stream from the session. Okay, so I'm very, very sorry to say that we have actually to close the door because of the security reasons. And we cannot fit everybody, so I think next year we should have like a big room for that session because it looks to be very popular. Yeah. So how are you guys going with your laptops? Or
Yes.
your laptops, okay. So I start something like this to present it.
Where are we going? We're going here.
We're going here. Are you going? You sit here, all of you.
People sitting on the floor feel very much like a demo combo.
Yeah, this is where. As long as no one takes off their trousers, they're very.
So in chronological order, I guess.
Good to see you.
Yeah, thank you.
This is awesome. It's not ridiculous. It's awesome. It's awesome. Yeah. You're gonna run the session in Tokyo, right?
Yeah. Well done, Thomas.
I'm gonna give it like 1 or 2 more minutes so everybody settles a bit, and then we're gonna start.
What's up?
Like, are we moving to the desk when we talk, or?
Yes.
Okay.
Is that okay?
Yeah, I guess so.
It's good because then I can see. Otherwise, I can't see.
You want to see as well?
Okay. Or I try to watch the session as well. Okay, so let's kick off the session. So welcome to our Demoscene session at SIGGRAPH Asia 2018. And we started Demoscene Beds of the Feathers a couple of years ago. It was exactly the same situation. And there was like maybe 2 years, it wasn't like Demoscene session like last year and the year before, but we're coming back, and we're coming back big. So we have actually 4 wonderful speakers, and I will kick off with a couple of words about what are the plans of Demoscene and SIGGRAPH especially. So this is the outline of today's session. So we're gonna have 4 speakers, so Matt, then we're gonna have Julian, Johan, and then Kentaro. So they are all Demosceners, and they are all like the heart of the Demoscene, so they're gonna be talking about their own experience with the Demoscene and some of their productions. And the reasons why we have the session as well is that I want to have Demoscene as a part of the SIGGRAPH, and my name is Tomasz Bednarz, and I'm the conference chair of SIGGRAPH Asia 2019, okay? So the SIGGRAPH Asia 2019 will be held in Australia, in Brisbane, and part of the program that I really want to have is to have Demoscene officially in the SIGGRAPH program, and perhaps we'll need, I can already see we need to have the largest room for Demoscene, which will be awesome. But if it happens you are a Demoscener as well, one thing that I want to say, start working on your production already, okay? Because we're gonna have competitions as well, and it's gonna be part of SIGGRAPH program, of course, so should be fun. So tell you a bit more about myself as well, just a few words, is I'm the director and head of visualization at the Expanded Perception Interaction Center, which is located in Sydney at UNSW Art and Design, and as well leading the Epicenter, which is, or leading the visual analytics program in CSIRO Data 61. And I'm like international, so I'm Demoscener as well, so I did a couple of productions in the old days, and I lived in Japan, I lived in Europe, I lived in US and Australia, so very international, so SIGGRAPH Asia will be as well very international. And this snapshot is from Epicenter. So Epicenter hosts the highest resolution screen in the world. it's 120 million pixels in 3D, okay? So it's the highest resolution, and for the same reasons we can run actually the highest resolution fragment shaders on the screen. So this is highest resolution fragment shader, which runs on the Epicylinder, which is one of our systems. So system is built of 56 screens, cross-connected, it's cluster-based system with 28 computers to visualize the fragment shader. And we can simulate the ocean, right? So using fragment shader, very, very simple to do. If you do Demoscene and fragment shaders, you know how it works. And this is one of the main reasons we never go to Bondi Beach, because it's too far, 20 minutes away. We can run it on our systems, right? So that's easy. And to tell you a bit more about, to close off and start the Demoscene program, is the conference program, and SIGGRAPH Asia 2019 will include Demoscene, as you can see. So it will be SA 2019 Demoscene. So be ready for that. And show you two snapshots and one short video from Australia, and then we go to Demoscene. So you can see one of the reasons to come to Australia for SIGGRAPH Asia will be Demoscene, of course, but as well to explore the unique nature of Australia. So you have a couple of animals like kangaroos and so on. And then we have as well, Brisbane is a beautiful city to explore as well. And to close off, I will show you the video so you can see, and when we jump to Matt. Don't know what happened with the video. I hope it will play. Okay. Okay, so we're ready to kick off. So if you're coming to Tokyo this year as well to SIGGRAPH Asia, Xavier will be running Birds of the Feathers in Tokyo about Demoscene. So we're planning towards that. And as I said, please start planning your trip to Australia as well. So Matt, ready to go?
Yeah, sure.
Awesome. Let's do it. Which do you need, HDMI? Oh,
HDMI.
there should be this one here.
Cool. Hello. So, is this working? Yes. Hey, so my name's Matt, and in the Demoscene, I'm known as Smash of Fairlight. because everyone still uses NICs like they're 14. So I only got a short time slot, so I'm going to just talk about one demo and one effect from one demo and how we and why we did what we did. And some technical explanation, as this is SIGGRAPH after all. So we made a demo for Revision Demo Party this year, Easter. It's the biggest party of the year, so the competition is very tough. So it's a PC demo, high end, and we were trying to think of cool things that we could put in a demo. And it's really hard to do interesting effects these days because a lot of stuff's already been done, and the audience has this idea that everything's incredibly easy when you have a modern GPU, even though everyone here knows that that's very far from the case and everything's extremely hard still. But to find things that impress the audience when everyone thinks that you're faking everything and cheating anyway is quite difficult. So one of the ideas we had to do was a cloud fly-through. So make a big cloudscape that was completely real-time, and the camera could fly through it. And by doing something big and high resolution, we hope that people would think that it was actually real and not being faked. So clouds are really hard. As everyone knows, clouds are really hard. They're basically like the ugly triangle of things in graphics that are really hard. So they're incredibly detailed down to a microscopic level, and they're also enormous. So you've got this huge scale, tiny detail, and they're constantly varying all the time, and they're transparent, which then you put transparent together with detailed, together with huge. And also you need to do lighting to make them look any good. So you have to do proper lighting, not just like hard shadows. You actually have to do semi-transparent shadows. So we hope that by doing the worst, most stupid thing you could do in computer graphics, everyone would be impressed if we actually pulled it off. So the basic approach. So there's a load of ways you could do clouds. Particles doesn't really work when you go to big scale. Volumes don't really work because the combination of scale and detail doesn't really work. So what we thought we'd do is use distance fields for the modeling, which meant that we could do something that was detailed and repeated, but with a reasonable amount of creative control. And it was also biased by the fact that our engine and tool has really good distance field modeling support, so it saved us doing all the work again. And then, so once you've done distance field, you're going to end up ray marching them. So we thought, okay, we'll just model the clouds with a distance field, and then we'll do a volumetric ray marcher with lighting, and it will all be great. So I'll go through the modeling quickly, so this is basically how we did it. So clouds, they're not just like a random Perlin noise field, right? They actually have structure and form. You can make shapes. You can see shapes in clouds. So what we did was we made a basic big kind of forms out of primitives like spheres. So you make a few clumps of spheres and then you repeat them, and that gives you this kind of big bulbous shapes. And then we added some additional base shapes, and we repeated those with some sort of sine warping and stuff. And then we added a base plane with some sort of sine waves on it to warp it. So then you can imagine you've got this kind of big cloudscape with lumps, cumulus lumps in it. And then we put all that together, and then we started adding noise. So we added a macro level of cellular, like Wally noise, and then kind of jittered it a bit so it looked decent. And that gives you this nice kind of clumpy, like cumulus pyroclastic shape. And then we added some simplex noise on top. And then we added another layer and so on. And then we just kind of fiddled with it around until it looked decent. So that gave us a nice kind of cloud form. So now we get to the interesting part, which is how we render it. So the basic approach, which you can code in about half an hour, is you just ray march the distance field for every pixel on screen. And you do sphere tracing up to the point where you hit the cloud. And then you just step. You do like fixed length steps when you're inside the cloud. And for every step, you just do a scattering absorption function. So that gives you like a simple kind of a depth image of a cloud that works pretty well with transparency. And then in order to do the light, at every step when you're inside the cloud, you cast another ray in the direction of the light, and then you do more scattering along the ray. So every point, so maybe to get decent detail, you're probably talking a few hundred points along a ray, and each one's going to have a ray towards the light, which is also going to be a few hundred points. So when you multiply that up, you get something that is basically intractable and doesn't work at all. So you have to start actually thinking and being clever about what you're going to do. So here's the naive approach in action. So you've got your cloud, you've got your eye, you do a ray march to get to the surface, and you step through, and each of those points you trace towards the light. So here's our better approach. So the ray marching thing, the problem with ray marching is that it's really horrendous for a GPU in terms of coherence and occupancy, because the threads all end up doing different things, particularly when you add the shadow pass in, because a ray that goes deeper into the cloud is going to do loads more things than the ray next to it, which doesn't. So it's absolutely horrendous for a GPU, and terrible as well for shader compilers, because you're doing a very complicated function, often with texture fetches, and then you're doing it in a loop, and there's branches and so on. You end up with a shader that's going to spill, which is nasty. So you need to find a way to reduce the complexity of the shader, use the shader units better, so you spread the load more evenly, and get rid of that horrendous second ray towards the light, because that didn't really work. That was a terrible idea. So what we did was we found a way to optimize the ray march for the transparent shape, and then we replaced the secondary rays with a deep shadow map. And then through luck and maybe a good idea, we found a really good fake for multiple scattering as well. A lot of Demoscene coding is that you do something properly and then you hack it around a bit and come up with something that looks good. So it enables you to find something that works in a particular situation that looks great. When you try a different situation, it may look less great, but you don't care about that because you're only presenting something in a demo for 30 seconds. All right, so the idea of spans. So the concept of a span, this idea that we do a low resolution trace from the viewer. And when it gets near to the cloud, to entering the cloud, we record the point along the ray that we're entering the cloud. And then we keep stepping through in low res with bigger jumps. And then we record the point at which it left the cloud. And then with these, so we have a little span, like an entry point and an exit point. And we push those into a structured buffer, into a big list. And then we do another pass, and we look at all of our spans, and we spread them evenly across compute wavefronts. So instead of dealing with like rays, we're now dealing with spans. And they're easy to split up. They're more deterministic. And so it enables us to use the GPU. So the rays which enter, you're only talking about rays which are actually entering clouds. All the stuff that misses the clouds completely, you don't have to worry about anymore. It's gone. So here's the basic the diagram for this. So you hit the cloud at low resolution, and then you step through, and you also work out roughly where you're going to hit full opacities, so you don't trace any further than you need to. And then you split the spans up. So this means, you might have one span that's got like 200 points along it, one span that's got 10 points. You can add those all up and then split them evenly across wavefronts. So you're always dealing with the same number of distance field evaluations. So it's even, and you get very good coherence, much better utilization of the shader units. So this worked, and this gave us performance that we needed. So when we came to the lighting is very simple. You cache the distance field to a volume, and you use octrees to choose the areas that you subdivide. And then you just do a column accumulation. So you've got a volume that's aligned with the light, right? So Z goes along the light direction. And it's a parallel volume. For each, so in 2D, you look at the X, Y, and then you just do a simple operation which walks through the columns in the Z values and adds them up and stores them back onto the texture. So what you end up with is you go from like a distance texture to a how much is along my ray texture. It's like a deep shadow map. Very, very quick. You can do that in comfortably sub half a millisecond for a quite big volume texture. So then the multi-scattering fake. So this gave us a really nice, you can see it here, this gave us a really nice direct illumination pass. So you can mess with the opacity, and all it does is vary the amount you're summing up at each pixel. So this worked really well for the direct ray. And what we realized was if you took that volume and then you just blur it a lot and downsample it and blur it and change the colors, you get quite a nice multi-scattering accumulation as well. So that worked really well. This gave us, if you think about it, it's kind of like a reasonable approximation of multi-scattering. It's just summing up light from around the volume and blurring it and adding it together. And then when you add those two together, you get quite a convincing looking cloud render. So that's all there is to it, really. So this ran at 1080p at 30 on a 1080 Ti. Actually, so Demoscene tricks again. It didn't quite run at 1080p. It ran at 1920 by 800, so we did little borders, and that gave us 30. Borders it's like Amiga all over again, isn't it? So yeah, little tricks. That's the beauty of doing a demo. It only has to work for that one thing. And especially if you maybe fix the camera shots so you don't get the really difficult cases. Here's a shot of how it looks in the tool. And if you want, why don't I actually load it up in the tool? Yes, the resolution's terrible, but yeah, I think maybe we'll be able to get the idea. So this is our tool. This is Notch, which is available now. And so this shows roughly how it's set up. So we have, so there's a cloud, so I can fly through this. Obviously runs a bit worse on my laptop, but you get the basic idea. And this shows the distance field modeling. So we've got different elements can all be moved around. So I'm just moving the base plane. And we've got control over things like the amplitude of the FBM and so on. It should never be underestimated, the power of having a creative ability to tune everything. Often having a relatively simple thing that you can mess with creatively in a fine-grained way gives you the results that would take years of actual coding and effort to achieve. Faking it until you make it is always the way. All right, I'm going to leave it there and pass on to the next person. Thank you very much.
So we're gonna have questions after the all talks, okay? Just in case we go over time.
No, I guess I don't need power right now. Where is the cable? It's here and okay, so let me see. Yeah, so here you see everything that's not what I want.
Try to change resolution to HD.
Yeah. So I just want to like Where is that? Extend. Yeah, that looks like what I want. Okay, that's not. That is not what I expected.
Try to do mirror, but put your primary screen and HD resolution.
So it's not. It's a Google. I'm going to manage that. Changes. Did it work this time? Yes. Up. Up. Okay, I think we're good. You hear me loud? Loading. Okay. So good morning, good noon, everyone. So thank you for being here. My name is Julien. I've been a programmer for over 10 years now. I work as a graphics engineer, and we're not really here to talk about work. So outside of work, I also do programming and graphics programming, and in this like a demo scene, the thing that we're here to discuss today. There's a lot I want to talk about, but unfortunately we only have so much time, so I'm going to try to keep a fast pace. Before I start, the slides are available online. I'm going to put a link at the end of the presentation in case you're interested. And now I guess I can start. Back in 2009, my good friend and I decided that we wanted to jump into the demo scene and start making productions and making 64Ks. So we created this group, Control Test, and we've been creating 64Ks ever since. We also made a 4K. We made one demo, and my friend made this tool called the Shader Minifier, which takes your shader source file and applies transformation to it, so it makes it not only smaller, but also easier to compress with a compression tool. But mostly, so we focus on 64K. And 64K is, it's pretty much like a demo. In many regards, it's really similar to a demo. It's an animation, a few minutes long, with visuals and sound. So you can think of it as a music video, so to speak. But it runs in real time on a computer, so more like a video game is, except it's not interactive. There is, however, one big difference with the demo in that in the size. A demo typically doesn't come with a size limitation except for convenience, because it's not convenient if you have something that is like gigabytes and gigabytes of space. A 64K intro, on the contrary, has a very strict limitation of 64 kilobytes. So all we have to work with is 65,536 bytes. Everything has to fit in it. Like there are no extra asset, no extra library. You can't use network or anything like that. The usual rule is you go to the shop, you buy a Windows computer with a decent graphics card, you put like up-to-date drivers, and you cut the network, and it should work on it. So, oh, by the way, the screenshot here is the tool we use for compression. It's called Crunchy. So it takes our compiled binary and compresses it more. So we're talking about putting an entire sorry. So 64K. We're not really used to think about those sizes anymore. So just to give you like a few reference points, because yeah, 64 kilobytes. So if you only have 64 kilobytes to work with, you can put like maybe less than half a second of sound at CD quality, or if it's going to be an MP3, like maybe 3 seconds. If you're going to have like a bitmap picture, well, basically you will have enough space to put an icon. And if it's a JPEG, it's going to be like a small, low quality thing. But here we're talking about putting an entire animation with like several minutes long with visuals and sound. So how do you do that, you might ask? And simply said, the answer is with extreme trade-off. Because at the end of the day, software engineering is all about making trade-offs. And what I mean by that is, like a typical trade-off is to use more memory to improve performance, or maybe to put more computer power to like improve like productivity for humans. Maybe your workflow, for example, is optimized for productivity as well. Like maybe you create your texture in Photoshop, you create your meshes in ZBrush, or etc. Because those tools are convenient. Maybe your asset data format is optimized for interoperability, or maybe loading speed. Your code, the code that of the tool you're using, probably rely on high-level like features and many libraries that make it more expressive or more robust or more like faster. We, on the contrary, make optimization and trade-offs that really wouldn't make any sense outside of the demo scene. So we optimize our workflow for creativity, just like you do, but mostly for size. So obviously we use compression, but that's not enough. Like you don't just make something and compress it and you're going to go down to 64K. That doesn't work. So we don't use Photoshop, we don't use Maya, we don't use any of that because those tools don't fit our workflow. So we use procedural generation instead. We design our data formats so they make the compression tool happy. We reduce floating point precision when we don't need that much precision. When it comes to the programming language, contrary to a misconception, we don't use assembly language. We mostly use just C++. But we don't use the standard library. Well, like we throw all of that away. We avoid generation that generate a lot of code, like the exception, the virtual methods, or the templates, things like that. And when we write feature, when we write algorithms, we try to keep it simple. We really go straight to the point, try to avoid the corner cases and things like that. We try to be clever. We use a lot of tricks to make like the code ever smaller. One example of tricks like that. Okay, so there is no way you can read that from where you're sitting. I'm sorry about that. It's okay. It's just a frame buffer structure where we have the size of the frame buffer, an ID, and a list of texture bound to it. And we were using this structure to factorize some code, and while doing so, we were expecting the code to get smaller, but in fact, it did not, and it even became a little bit smaller. So that was surprising, and I tried to replace the array with just a pointer and allocating the array somewhere else, and that did make a noticeable difference on the size code, and by noticeable, I mean 160 bytes. So most people wouldn't even notice that, but when you only have 64 kilobytes to work with, 160 bytes you do notice. My suspicion is that by having the array directly in the structure, it forced the compiler to generate additional code for the construction and the destruction, and so everywhere it was used, you had this additional code. I haven't double checked. All I noticed is by making this change, I saved 160 bytes, so I'm taking it. Here is another example, a little bit more extreme. So it's just a matrix multiplication, standard matrix multiplication for graphics. The point, however, is that there are two implementations of it. There is the standard naive implementation that you would normally do, and there is this obfuscated one, which does this weird little bit arithmetic thing, which you would never normally do. We noticed that sometimes when writing code this way, it took less space. So here, this change saved 19 bytes. So I have a comment that says, yeah, there is a reason. It's not just insanity. We do that for a reason. Exactly the same trick has been used in a handful of places in the code. So it saved up to 100 bytes. There is a function somewhere that takes a height map, computes a gradient to compute the normal map, and that saved a little bit more space. So those little tricks, they are actually really difficult, in fact, to predict whether they will work or not. So in the end, any optimization process, we measure and we compare and we iterate like that. So here, for example, this chart represents the size of the binary in our latest production from the moment we were able to compile to something in shipping configuration to the moment we released that revision in April 2017. So you can see there are spikes, ups and downs. So here, for example, my friend said, hey, we have this model over there that uses marching cube, and it's the only model doing that, and it takes 1 kilobyte, and 1 kilobyte is a lot. Can we not do this differently? So we just removed it. At some point, we were looking at our shader code, and we thought, hey, maybe we could implement this optimization in the shader compression code so that it would rename the identifier differently. And we saved almost 700 bytes, so we were really happy. In fact, we could, we had more optimization after that. And near the release, we had some space left, so we decided to put back the ray marching cube mesh because it was looking better than the alternative. And so we released like that in April. To be honest, we were not so happy with the quality of what we did, so we kept working on it until a final release in December. So first, we did some grunt work with like the, removing bytes, like a few bytes here, a few bytes there with the kind of crazy optimization I showed to you earlier. But sometimes you find like interesting nuggets. So we realized at some point that by switching to the fast calling convention, we could save 700 bytes. So that made us really happy, and we could put like an entire new scene in there. So we did just that. We added a new scene, and we kept adding more content and polishing until the release. So I've talked earlier about a function where, like, I showed you a change that saved 19 bytes, and that might seem like a crazy quantities to talk about. But here in this graph, the average per commit is actually increasing the binary by 18 bytes, more or less. So of course that's a completely misleading figure to talk about, because it goes up and down. It grows faster at the beginning than at the end. But what you have to realize is, and in this graph, the biggest commit only adds 2073 bytes to the binary. So after release, we moved on other things. We started thinking about what we would do next. We implemented new features in the engine. We fixed some things. We cleaned up the code. And every so often, I would go back to this production in particular to see how our modifications were affecting the binary size. And it went down a little bit, but like just recently, 2 weeks ago, I found this other nugget where there was some debug code that we were not using in shipping, and I was assuming the compiler would remove it automatically, and it did not. So adding a macro around it saved another 400 bytes. So that's too bad. We might have been able to add another scene to it. So here is how it looks when we look at the 64K, how it's used for a typical demo. So for our last one, the biggest part are the engine, the meshes, and the music and synthesizer, which all takes around 13 kilobytes. Surprisingly, the texture don't take that much, so maybe in the like it's up over there, so less than 5 kilobytes. So maybe in the future we might want to use more texture than that. To give you a quick idea of how our creative process works, so we had a boat in that intro, and this is one of the very first screenshots we took of it, like while making it. So the hull here is made with a simple height map. So you try to play with a simple mathematical function to create a shape, and you add more detail to it. But this is all done like mathematically, so really procedural approach. Here we add the bridge and the deck and things like that. So the upper part of the boat is more traditional, like it's more like what you would do in Maya, except it's done manually with placing a cube and moving faces and stuff. While the bottom part is really just like mathematical functions. Here we add we check that the UV mapping is working correctly, and here is the final version with the texture. So if you look at that, you might think the quality is not so good. Like any student in an art school using Maya or 3ds Max is going to do something much better than that. But in the intro, this boat is meant to be seen from underneath the water surface, so it doesn't really matter. Like all this detail is going to be lost. Actually, there is probably already too much detail in there. A quick quiz over there. So this boat here, like the entire mesh plus the textures. So we're inside of a 64 kilobyte intro. So who thinks this entire model takes less than 10 kilobytes? Okay, about a third to a half of the room. Okay, it's less. Who thinks it's less than 5 kilobytes? Okay. Who thinks it's less than 2 kilobytes? Okay, so there's some faith in it. Well, unfortunately, I cannot answer that question because when I measured it, the mesh is like 929 bytes and the texture is about the same size. But when I try to measure that, like there is some unknown values that enter the game, because if I remove all the meshes, I have a sum that is like bigger than the sum of the parts. So more or less you can count like at 20-25%, but basically this boat is at most 2.5 kilobytes. So continuing, so this boat, I said like we have enough detail. Here is how it looks in the final shot. So from underneath the water, like you wouldn't notice anything. So this is the kind of quality that we can get with a 64 kilobyte intro, and we try to push the boundaries further and further each time. By the way, this picture doesn't fit in 64 kilobytes. That's the irony. Here is another shot of the same production. So this is by far our biggest mesh. So here it's much bigger, so of course it's going to take a lot more size. The ray marching mesh that I talked about earlier is the statue in the back. But here we're still talking about like 7 kilobytes, 6 to 7 kilobytes for the entire thing, like the temple inside and outside. And by the way, this scene here is modeled after the Temple of Diana, also known as the Artemision. So one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world, because we thought it would be a lot easier to work with like schemes from an actual building rather than trying to make one ourselves. I have a quick video to show to you to give you like an idea of how this is made. So if I put this here, that should work. So this is a terrain. So we have a function that is going to add a shape in the middle. We had some noise and we cut it, so we have sort of an island, and we could put some texture on it. We have like the entrance that is done with a for loop with those stairs. The column is just one cylinder, and we had some shapes and some texture to it, and we reproduced that column as many times according to the floor map. Then we can add the walls and all the details, and well, the statue is not visible in there. Then we have the beams, and we can add the metop and the roof on top of it. Then you just add water, some foam, and there you have your scene. So yeah, water not included. Like the temple is about 7 kilobytes. So trying to close that. Yes. Last point is about iteration time, because iteration time is really a big problem for us. Like size restriction prevent us from using like off-the-shelf tools. We have to rewrite everything from scratch on our own. So this takes enormous time. Like it's really ridiculous the time we spend on things that you would normally don't even think about. So we need efficient ways to create content. We often have like a large part of the demo data written directly in code. We have a lot of hard-coded values that need a lot of tweaking. So we need that iteration time to be as fast as possible. And I expect to be preaching the choir here, but like the faster you iterate, the more you can experiment, the more variation you can explore, and by doing that, the more you can refine your vision and improve the overall quality. So how we do that? We have different techniques so we can edit the source code at runtime and see the result without like stopping and have to restart the demo. So for example, like runtime compile C++ is really useful, but it's not the only tool we use. We make all our data hot reloadable, like all of it, the shaders, the meshes, the texture, everything. And this is honestly the single best advice I can give to anyone. Make all your data hot reloadable so that you're inside the program. And what we do, we keep track of data sources, and we detect when there is any change to any of the files that we use. And when that happens, we just reload and update the state of the program automatically. It's really simple to implement for the kind of code base we're talking about. Obviously, if you have like a large code base with a lot of dependencies and legacy code, it's going to be more involved. But in my opinion, that's really worth it. Also, another way of working is like the tools we're using. So we're using Visual Studio, for example, like many programmers. If there are some unexpected ways of using or abusing the tool that helps like improve the speed of the creativity of the creation process, we do it. And of course, like we try to improve our processes. So as a conclusion, size coding, it's really fun. It's really you learn a lot of things, but I won't lie to you, it's also really hard. How one change is going to impact the size after compression is really hard to predict. So we have to use a very rigorous process of optimization where we measure and we check how a modification impact the overall size. While doing so, we learn a lot about compilation, about like data, about how compression works. So that's super interesting. In general, procedural generation is really a lot of fun. And I would tend to say that having those heavy constraints really makes you more creative because you try to find your way out of those situations. Finally, and I think this is not only true for the Demoscene, but for any creative process, really iteration time is king. So that's all I have. So thank you for listening. And if you're interested, the slides are there. Okay, can you hear me? Okay. So my name is Johann, or Cooper of Mercury in the Demoscene, and I will continue Julien's topic on. I will talk about our procedural workflow, and especially how that works for sort of the art pipeline. I will have to go quickly through those slides and skip some because I have recycled them. But what you can see here is the background is a shot of one of our 64K intros. And my message is basically, if you force yourself to not use those static assets, you'll have more fun anyway. Which is basically why we do all this. Yeah, so no assets, which is sort of not true because you're seeing something, so there's something in there, but not an asset as in a dead piece of data anywhere. So usually when you ask an artist about what the procedural workflow is, they will point you to Houdini, and there's all those crazy Houdini tutorials for all those procedural things, but then you bake it and you put it on a disk, and then you download it on Steam, and the game is still 50 gigabytes. So you may have a procedural representation of what you do at some point in the art pipeline, but you might just bake it, and then once you draw over it in Photoshop on your nice procedural texture, it's gone. You can't go back. And what I advocate is having the procedural asset inside the engine and not do any baking. Of course, you will need some kind of, to make it fast, you will need some kind of caching, but what I would call it caching and not baking. It's a distinction I make. So, yeah. Why? Because it's fun. There's this notion of Kolmogorov complexity, which describes like sort of the essence of some piece of data is the smallest program that can produce this data, which is sort of quite similar to the goal of size coding. And the nice thing about this is if you make something smaller, by definition, it has more meaning to it. And that means that every change you make to whatever representation you have, it will have a bigger impact, because if you have just a bitmap file, you change 1 pixel, you change 1 pixel. If you have a description like how dirty is this piece of metal, and you just have a slider for the dirtiness, then you have a much more meaningful change. And this allows you to iterate much quicker. And if you just have pixels and polygons, you need powerful tools to work with them. So all those modeling tools, all those texturing tools, they are so extremely complex, and they take the dump dead data, work with it, and then write it back. And yeah, this is a waste, I think. Photoshop has improved a little bit over the last years because they now have this non-destructive layers. So there's a little bit of a tiny procedural aspect to it now. So, and I will talk about how roughly we do it. But of course, we do this in our free time. And what I would like to see is an actual studio with many people and resources behind a workflow like this. So this is what our tool looks like. This is our old tool, basically. So, and yeah, we have now it looks different, but this is how it looked to us when we made this production. So you have a timeline. To the right, there are some editors for colors, for example. You can move cameras. To the left, is some performance indicators. So this is basically how it looks to us. Just the editing and the animation of the content we make. As an example for a way of procedural representation is just writing code that describes the geometry. So you can describe a sphere by assigning every point in 3 space distance to the center of the sphere minus the radius of the sphere, and then you get distance to
the surface of the sphere. And inside the sphere, you'll have negative values, and outside you'll have positive values. So for every point in space, you can see how far you're away from those. For a box, it is very slightly more complicated, still one line. And if you want to combine a sphere and the box, you take the minimum of the two distances, and you get this still very non-interesting object. But that's the basic idea of this way of geometry representations. And what I like about this is that you still write in code what the essence of the thing is, because this is literally the definition of a sphere. So you don't use a mesh of 1,000 vertices that happen to be distributed around the center of the sphere, but you actually write, this is an actual sphere. And the fact that you know that you still have all this information, you can do crazy things with it. Like you can combine those, like this box and this sphere, in interesting ways that would not be possible if you had a mesh for it. And so you can add it, you can use the two distances to make some transitions between the objects, like stairs or round corners. You can subtract the meshes. You can just draw some kind of pipe where they intersect. And like the thing at the bottom right is just 3 boxes intersected with this stairs operator, and you get this super crazy shape. And what you see is literally what you write in the code, because there's 3 boxes intersecting, making stairs where they do. And this is literally like this super small piece of code. And you can, if you rotate one of those boxes, everything will follow. And if you want to have a look, we released the library for building this this kind of geometry at this URL. So if you can also just Google for a signed distance field library or something, and you will probably find it. So this is some examples of some things we made with this way of modeling geometry, and those are all ray merged in real time. And as Matt mentioned, ray merging is super slow, so it can be accelerated in some ways. Like, yeah, okay, I'll skip that part, but we don't have time for anything for everything. But it's part of building some acceleration in the signed distance function itself, like having some early outs and things like that, not doing stupid things like loop. If you write a for loop, you're doing it wrong. Yeah, there's an entire talk made by me on YouTube that you can find for more info about this. I just want to use it as an example for representing things by their essence. So, for example, for the spaceship on the upper right, there is like a value for how smooth the blending between the body and the wings is, and you can just tweak that value until you have the shape that you like. And that's all still there. You can still change it at the very last minute of your production if you want. Yeah, so the question is for this, how do you texture it? Because you don't have UVs. In my book, this is a good thing because I hate UVs. And artists do as well, I would guess. There's no general way of dealing with them, and it's always a pain. So what we do is we have the materials in 3D as well. And, well, of course, they can't be in a lookup texture because that would never scale. You can't have like 2K cubed texture, and we would have to generate it beforehand. And yeah, so nope. So we evaluate some function that for every point in 3 space gives us the material properties like roughness, metallic, base color, whatever your material model wants to have. And those are some examples of things. So this is just some screenshots from our material test scene. So it is a bit older, but still some variety. And yeah, the nice thing is that this just works with any geometry. You don't have to worry about UV unwrapping. And same thing goes for, as for the geometry goes for the materials, which is you have more meaningful control. You don't have to open Photoshop and retouch pixels if you want to make it more dirty. You take your dirtiness slider, because you need to have something like this. If you want to make it dirty, you will have a value, and you just expose that. And you can also drive it by the geometry, for example. This is also what, for example, in a logarithmic substance painter or substance designer, those workflows exist there, but then they still bake out the asset and then it's gone. And what we do, we ship the whole representation because it's much more compact, and also because we can do things like just animate it, because why not? So the question is, how exactly do you define those 3D materials? And yeah, we hardcode them in shaders. This is basically still the same as wiring up a super complicated, ugly-looking material graph in whatever engine you use. So it's the same. It's just that it's code instead of a graph, and it still contains all the information as not as the dead data. The next thing is using physics simulation, if possible. So for this crater landscape, we just apply some super fake height map. Like iteratively, we throw comments at it, and then this comes out. And this would be super difficult to describe in a mathematical way, but in a closed form. But as an iterative process, this is still super easy to do. So in this case, the definition of this so-called asset still involves like executing something multiple times. But if you want to change the shape or the distribution of something, we can still do that at any point in time. And so for example, we've experimented with modeling landscapes by actually melting some of it, letting the lava flow and letting it cool, because that will just generate more interesting terrain than just adding procedural noise layers on top of each other. And so just the real processes are often super compact and easy. And why not? So for this production, for example, we had some Saturn rings, and we just set the grain size and the density, and the scattering does the rest, and it's actually super fast. And we don't even have to store some colors for them, because this is just defined by the distribution. And same for some other details. So do you know this texture? Who does? So anyone who has ever played any video game knows this texture, because there was this point in time when everybody used to slap this in front of cameras when lens stirred was new. And this is really a shame, because coding something like this procedurally in your lens stirred shader is so super easy, and there's really no excuse for having this kind of thing on all the cameras in your video game, even though there are different cameras. If you have it procedurally, just take a different random seed, and you will not have the same texture on all of them. So I'll have to skip some of this. So and then there's the then you're an artist at a studio, and then there's the art director breathing down your neck and says, darken this 1 pixel a bit. And then you, the artist who is doing this procedurally, you say, no, I can't, because I don't have pixels anymore. So this is why this will be difficult for a conventional art workflow to just switch to something like this. You don't have control at this level. If you want to darken a single pixel, you have to write a little function that darkens this little pixel, because that information has not been in the representation of the object before. You would have to add this information. But you have different information at a different level, like the leaves under under a tree are distributed according to some distribution function, and you can change that. So if you want the leaves to be more to the right because the wind is blowing from the left, you just write that. But making that one leaf a little bit lighter, that one specific, that is a hard thing to do because you'll have to add some code. So those are the trade-offs, but I like having the high level of control because, well, I don't have an art director breathing down my neck, so this is fine for me. And yeah, so you're just not doing anything by hand anymore. So your muscle memory for your mesh and pixel workflow is now obsolete. But in my opinion, the procedural representation is just so much more rich. This is totally worth it. And yeah, same argument about the iteration time. It's just so much faster to be able to do this at any point in time. So I'll just skip some things. And my main message is basically I would like to represent things by the essence and not by their surface. And having this instant feedback, having no modes, no, I'm now modeling this and then I'm viewing it in the engine, then it looks like crap and I'm going back, and nope. It has to be without any modes, and yeah, then we will just be able to iterate super fast. And all of this is a consequence of the size coding. So it is seriously really forcing us to do the most fun thing anyway. This is why we do it. Thank you.
Okay.
Why not delete?
Is that PowerPoint? If you start it,
Yeah.
it'll come up there.
You stop? No?
It's okay if you pull out your PowerPoint. Get your PowerPoint up.
No, this
It's
is
not PowerPoint?
keynote.
Oh, okay. Yeah, can you mirror?
Sorry.
I have. I'll try this one.
Oh, okay.
Just gonna drag it over. There we go.
Okay. Thank you. So,
Audio?
yeah, no. Okay. Oh. Okay. So. Okay, sorry. So, hello. I'm main organizer of Tokyo Demo Fest. So, my name is Kentaro Oku. I'm a graphics programmer. But this time slide is not technique, just to introduce. So, have a fun. So, first part, I showed the report of Tokyo Demo Fest 2017. Then, I introduce Tokyo Demo Fest 2018. Okay. Tokyo Demo Fest has been since 2011 every year. The party location is 3331 at Chiyoda, nearby Akihabara. Akihabara is the famous electric geek town in Japan. Normal entrance fee is 4,000 yen. We have a student discount and early website register discount. So this place was junior high school in old days. So Tokyo Demo Fest is 2 days event, Saturday and Sunday. Visitor has 2 days pass. The entrance is free. Tokyo Demo Fest has 5 demo competitions and seminars and DJ VJ event. 480 demo products released in 2017. One was demo competition. Combined demo compo means executable demo and browser-based demo. This is the winner this year, Shift by FMS Cat, made with OpenGL, including music with GL cell shader in 204 kilobyte, but now muting. Okay. So next, GL graphics compo is unique demo compo we propose at Tokyo Demo Fest. The platform uses GL Sandbox. The winner is Shotkey Worlds by Soma Ark. He has created original fractal editor. So fractal editor generates GL code. Next is Wild Demo Compo. Wild Demo Compo is a freestyle demo competition. Last year, the winner is released by Markan, showed an open source laser projector and animation. So below image is laser projector. About visitors, Tokyo Demo Fest is growing every year. Last year, it's 140 people came from 9 different countries. So on Twitter, Mr. Dub tweeted about first place demo, Shift. He also visited Tokyo Demo Fest 2016. Tokyo Demo Fest has 5 seminars last year. This is presented by Hashiras. They are a famous VR company in Japan. So below the image, this is Toshiya Hashitsuka. He is associated professor at Tokyo University. He is well known for stochastic progressive photon mapping. There was Hashiras VR play zone. There is a big air circulator on the floor. Visitor enjoyed urban coaster VR with Vive. Okay. So on the food table, some foods and drink is supported by visitor. Japanese demoscene like pizza and sushi. This is a VJ DJ event. One of the famous 8-bit sound DJ known as Chibitek. So behind you can see the live VJ animation done in GLSL. So there is demo compress scenes. Your demo shows on a big screen. So center image is wild demo compo. Great demos and prize statue. So there is Amiga 500 and 3D printed teapot. Visitors bring some interesting devices. So Tokyo Dem Fest is very friendly atmosphere. You can make good communication and connection in Japan. So last is sponsor. There is last year sponsors. About gold sponsors, Imagica is a famous movie industry company in Japan. Polyphony Digital is a famous game production company, well-known Gran Turismo. Tokyo Dem Fest is only possible thanks to the help of sponsors. Please contact us. So last part, I introduced Tokyo Dem Fest 2018. So we have a Tokyo Dem Fest 2018 on 1st and 2nd December. Same place last year. So as you probably know, SIGGRAPH Asia 2018 will be in Tokyo, Yurakucho, from 4th to 7th December. Very nearby place at Tokyo Dem Fest. So please come to both SIGGRAPH Asia and Tokyo Dem Fest 2018. So we have an invitation demo in 64K. You can download it from below the link later. So we have a website, but shows date and location only. We'll update more information soon. If you have any questions, contact Twitter or email. Okay. So thank you. This is slide URL.
What we can do now, we have around 15 minutes. So if you have any questions to the speakers, just go ahead. I know it's a lunchtime, so everybody is hungry after watching and being squeezed in the session. Do you have any questions from the audience?
Okay, question was how to make the music working within the size limit, or how to make it, and what everyone does is you make some custom MIDI-like format for representing the contents of the music, and you write a synthesizer. So, well, that is basically it. But of course, there's more to it on how to actually do it in practice. But there are some, if you don't want to do that yourself, there are actually systems like that available by Demosceners for Demoscene production. So we have our own synthesizer, but I think you guys use 64 Clang too, I think?
So yes, we're using 64 Clang. So that's some German guy, Dominic. Yeah, go for it. Well, he's living in Munich. Is all I know about him.
It was made for our 64 Clang, actually.
What?
It was made for us.
So yeah.
2011.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, he made this synthesizer called 64 Clang that is really made for like size coding, and so I don't understand anything about what I'm going to say, but it's a VSTi. So basically, the musician uses their like usual tool, but it's still going to compress that to a library, and we just plug that and it works.
So you can do it. You can write like a simple synth in like few hundred bytes. If you just want to do like a 303, like some basic waveforms with filters, you can do that in a few hundred bytes. But this one he's talking about, 64 Clang, that's using physical modeling.
Yeah,
Really good quality, like you can do very realistic instruments, big simulation. But it just works as a plugin, so you can use it in anything like Cubase or anything.
Yeah.
And you just have a button that captures the MIDI data, exports it out. MIDI data compresses very well.
Yeah, and in the end, you just link it with your executable and just call the function for letting it run, and have usually you have the music drive the timing for the rest, so you just grab the time from the music that's playing, and then that goes into the rest of your animation and drives the whole thing. More questions from?
Hey, so Matt, you're doing like a tool for iteration time for one thing, I suppose, for all the kinds of stuff as well.
So, well, it's not just for demos anymore.
Yeah, no, but it's also for demos.
Mhm.
But you're improving iteration time, and that's how we're making the tool as well. And you're writing everything in code to improve iteration time. So why are you not doing a graph tool, and Matt, why are you not writing it in code?
I think so. The tool you saw briefly that generates the shaders that they write in code, but using pre-made building blocks. So you glue the nodes together, and it builds the shader as a string, and then compiles it. And this enables you to actually have things like handles to move stuff around, and it enables an artist who isn't familiar with the code to glue stuff together in a hierarchical fashion and be experimental about it. They don't have to know what they're doing to achieve the result. I think the reality is you can do the same in both approaches, but the tool way takes a lot longer to develop.
Yeah, which is true, because as I can attest, because we started writing a node-based tool now, and yeah, it is working now, but there is a reason that we didn't do a proper release in the last 2 years. So I mean, I do not really believe in visual programming. I think if it is equivalent to writing code, then writing code is the better representation.
That's the wrong way to do it, isn't it? I agree with you.
Yeah, so if it has the same expressiveness as code, then it must be code. So the tool part, the visual part, must be some higher level thing. So if it's gluing code blocks together, that is a useful thing. If it's just driving like the creation of buffers and the execution of things that happen in some pipeline fashion, that's also super useful. So that's the kind of thing that we're doing. But if the code is actually the most accessible and fast way to describe something, then why not? I mean, you do not have to restart or recompile the tool to change something in the shader. As Julian said, you just edit the file on disk, and like half a second later, the change is on screen anyway. You don't have to move the camera or anything, so you zoom in on the part you're interested in, you change your stuff in the code, and if you find there's some number you're changing all the time, you make it an input parameter, and then you get a slider in the tool automatically, and then you have that, and so it's still reasonably fast.
If you look in our tool, some of the nodes are actually bits where you write a bit of code in the string. It just means it's easier to manage, like swapping bits in and out, gluing stuff together. You can build up a little library of things. It's an easier way. But the point about visual programming is completely true. Like most node-based tools, I think, just do it completely wrong. They end up with like a node that does add, another node that does mul, and you end up with like a big graph that does something you could have written in code. Like our typical graphs have about 20 nodes in them, and that gives you a granularity you can actually manage. If you've got 1,000 nodes in your graph, then it's unmanageable. You'd be better off coding it, because at least you have structures in place to actually manage that.
Plus, if you're size coding, you have to store 1,000 nodes, and I'd rather store the ASCII representation of the shader of those 1,000 nodes, because that compresses very well. So if you do size coding, that's another reason to actually do code. But
Okay, we have another question from the audience.
Yeah, so I have a more personal question for all the presenters. How did you guys get started in Demoscene, specifically for the people doing size coding? Like, what was the path that to be down?
I think size coding was cool in like 2001 or something. So.
I think the first time I was exposed to the Demoscene was in 1995, where I bought like a Spanish programming magazine that was having a report about like the Euskal party in Spain, and it had like this CD with some demos on it. And back then, I didn't understand what this was about. I just thought, wow, this looks cool. But I had no idea what I was exposed to. It only took like until university where I was exposed again to the Demoscene, and then I understood what it was about, and then I realized like, oh, that was that. And when my friend contacted me, he was like, hey, we could make a group and enter competitions, and that was after, like somewhere in the mid 2000s, like the 64K reached a peak, and then it seemed like everybody moved to something else, so there was a huge void.
Got too hard.
Yeah,
It's got too hard.
yeah, like basically the level got impossible to enter, and like the people who were there just left. And my friend was like, "Hey, there is nobody doing 64K anymore. Like, sounds like it's easy." Well, that was a mistake, but that's how we entered it.
I think, I don't know if today, if you would enter it. Because when I joined the Demoscene, it was like, what, 94, 95? If you were on a computer and you're trying to do something creative, there really wasn't very many options. Like all the tools to do 3D or music or anything were either like Demoscene oriented anyway, or they were terrible and slow and huge and horrible. So your option back then, there was no other creative computer scenes except the Demoscene or making games. Now there's tons of options. Like there's people doing like WebGL stuff or 3.js or open frameworks or the processing or something. There's tons and tons of options to do it that aren't the Demoscene. But the Demoscene is still the coolest. So.
yeah, for me, I had known about the Demoscene for a while, but I'd always thought this is just black magic. I will never be able to contribute anything. And then I met some people, more or less by chance, who said, "Oh, we're going to some demo party," and I was like, "Yeah, okay. Nice, I'll come with you because I won't go there alone because I will feel disconnected, but going there with some people, okay, cool." And then I realized when actually talking to people, it's all a bit like stage magic, and people are. Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm spilling the secrets here, but I mean, this is really the important part about getting in, because if you just go to a demo party and you ask people, they will actually seriously help you, and they will be super friendly, and there are some tools that you just have to know about, and because they are so obscure and so tailored to that one specific purpose they have, like making music for 64 kilobyte intros is not exactly like a huge field. So you won't find them that easily, you won't just stumble over them. But just by talking to people, you will realize, okay, so this is how you do it, like don't link to standard library, use this executable packet to go down from 350 kilobytes to 64 kilobytes, okay? And don't do this, use that tool, and this is how we do it, and there's like, this old 64K has been released with source, so maybe that's a point to start. And so you get the pointers just from being there physically at the demo party.
The demo party is a bit like SIGGRAPH, but darker with a bit more beer.
Yeah, a lot more beer. And yeah,
it's really
and
funny.
food.
Sorry.
So
no.
let's see what we can do at SIGGRAPH Asia next year.
Yeah.
We can do that, computer graphics, and guys, if you want to
and the
start,
beer?
it's a time to, yeah. Well, we're going to think about this. Yeah.
The Demoscene is very much, it is kind of like a counterculture. It is very, I think it's intentionally different from the normal graphics world. It's more, I think it's intentionally a bit more rebellious and a bit more of a party kind of spirit.
I heard also that like a certain demo parties after the contest
guys, I'm sorry, I have to stop because we're being kicked off. So can we move this conversation outside?
Yeah, we'll be available outside.
Try some Australian food.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you.
Chocolate. Some Australian stuff.
Sorry, all this came really
Hey. Yes, yes, definitely.
for you. Some cola.
Yeah, I have to run too, but thanks for coming. Salut. Salut.
How are you doing?
Good talk. All right. Yeah. So I don't know. You can try this. This
Oh,
adapter
actually,
worked
if
before.
this is that the original one?
Well, this is what I just used in the last.
Alright, let me use this one.
So I don't know. For some reason, those ones are a little funky, but
Yeah, I know. Oh, the projector, is it on? Is
Oh,
it
yeah.
on? I don't.
there you go. You're up there. So
Okay,
If
let
you
me-
wanted to change your resolution to 1020, and that'll get you your full screen.
Let me
Or you can
see
just
if
leave it
it
the way it is.
works.
It's up to you. All right.
Oh, it works. Perfect.
I'll
Yeah.
turn it off in the back. Yeah.
Do you want to
use it
check
right
your
now?
slides?
When it starts.
Yeah, yeah. When we start, I'll turn it up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, we're starting in minus 30 seconds.
Okay. Okay. I'll turn that.
Okay, cool.
それを Mac ですから。どうですか。
俺は何番目でしょ
まあどちらでも多分何かシガフのプレジデントさんとジェシカさんと一番と後では
う。じゃあ次
どちら
ジェシカは先でいいと
ジェシカさんとローズさんとアンジュさんと
そうそう。俺
まあ
3番目どっちでもいいんだよ。決めてくれよ。
3番で大丈夫ですか？
はい。
お願いします。
どう
OK。
ぞ絵はいいです。ちょっとエアコンしててもらっていい？途中から引っかかれちゃったりしてね。
みんな変な顔する。
I think the mics are fine. Do I need to turn it on? Oh, okay. What about the live streaming?
Live streaming is going.
It's going. Okay, perfect. All right. So, shall we start?
Yeah, with Jessica, right?
Well, first I'm going to make a quick introduction of the
Yeah.
session. And
Go ahead.
okay. Okay. Hi everyone. Thank you very much for coming. Session is SIGGRAPH in Japanese and Japan's G Showcase. My name is Bekcher. Today I'm replacing the session chair Mohammed Tarif. And the idea of the session is to give you a quick introduction of SIGGRAPH for Japanese attendees and also give you a quick showcase of Japanese research. We've been doing this session for previous years. You could check out the previous live streaming on the SIGGRAPH website. And for some reason, here's our photos, but let me go to the first slide. So first, we're going to introduce you the, SIGGRAPH chairs and SIGGRAPH committees. And first, we'd like to start with SIGGRAPH President, Jessica. Could you please come here?
In Japanese, too.
Yeah, just please come here.
You
just say.
Oh, what?
Yeah.
What?
らっしゃい。こんにちは。ベクター。
すいません、日本語でできないからどうしよう。美穂さんお願いします。
すいません。セッション始めたいと思いますが、今のアナウンスメントは、インターナショナル・リソース・コミティ委員の、愛知大学
はい、筑波大学。
筑波大学のベクターさんからご挨拶いただきました。では一番最初は、ACM シーグラフシーグラフカンファレンスを運営しております上の団体なんですが、団体の会長のジェシカ・ホジンスさんからご挨拶いただきます。
Okay. So thank you very much for inviting me here. Do you want to translate sentence by sentence?
Oh, yes.
Okay. So that was just a thank you. All right. Anyway, welcome to SIGGRAPH. I think we have a great conference.
ようこそ。なんかいい素敵なカンファレンスがこれから始まります。
So I think we have a great conference for you. There are many exciting events, from technical papers to lots of new virtual reality experiences and other kinds of interactive experiences. So I hope you have a great week with us, and thank you for coming all this way from Japan to see the conference.
テクニカルペーパーなどいろんなイベントがありますので、日本からわざわざ来ていただいて誠にありがとうございます。
So I'm president of the SIGGRAPH organization, and so we put on this conference as well as SIGGRAPH Asia.
シグラフのプレジデントであって、シグラフアジアも今年も行う予定です。
So we also have a lot of year-round activities, from chapters to various different kinds of events on the web pages for the digital arts community and for education.
なんか年中ではいろんなイベントをやっておりまして、チャプターズとかウェブ上のイベントとかなどいろいろやっております。
And we have a number of new initiatives to try and support our community. So we've created a few new awards, an Educators Award and a Practitioners Award. And this year we're also starting a SIGGRAPH Academy. So the first members will be inducted into the Academy this year.
今年から新しい、賞も設けたりしていろんなアクティビティを増そうとしていて、一つは今まで例えばペーパーですと、アチーブメントアワードとかあったんですけど、今年からプラクティショナーズアワード、要は現場っていうか実際の、産業の方で頑張ってる人も称えるとか、そういういろんな賞を設けるようにして、よりいろんな人がSIGGRAPHに関心を持ってもらうように動いてますっていう、今の最後は僕が勝手に足しました。
I think you said that much better than I did. So we also have some new workshops and talks to bring new areas into SIGGRAPH. So we'll have morning talks 3 days this week on new areas, as well as a set of workshops that are running right now on Sunday to introduce new areas like autonomous driving, health applications, and we have another workshop on truth in graphics. So these are new topics that we think might be of interest to the SIGGRAPH community.
なんか新しく足したイベントはワークショップとかがありまして、朝のモーニングトークとか3日間ほどやっておりまして、内容的には自動運転とかの技術、あとヘルスケアのイベントなどやっております。
Okay, and with that, I would just like to welcome you, and I hope that you have a great week here at SIGGRAPH with us. Thank you.
Do you have slides? Or? Oh, okay.
次は2019年来年のシグラフにちょっと早いんですけどカンファレンスについて、ミッキーさんからカンファレンス委員長のミッキーさんからご挨拶いただきます。
Hi, I'm Mickey Rose. I'm the conference chair for SIGGRAPH 2019.
シグラフに2019の、カンファレンス委員長のミッキー・ローズです。
We'll be back in Los Angeles next year, July 28th through August 1st, downtown at the Los Angeles Convention Center.
来年はロサンゼルスに戻ります。で、7月 28th? ミッキー 28th?
28 July through 1 August.
28日から8月の1日までです。
And our website just recently went live, so go see it. It's s2019.sigraph.org.
ウェブサイトがちょうど今公開になりまして、ちょっとアドレス is kind of long, so ちょっとすいません、アドレスちょっと長かったんですけど。
Much like the 2018 address, just updated.
今年のと同じアドレスで数字書いていただければいきますので、ぜひ見てください。
And it doesn't yet have actual submission information on it, just a placeholder, but it will be coming in the next month or two.
で、サブミッションのご投稿の情報はまだそこにないんですけど、来月ぐらいにアップしますので、ぜひチェックしてください。
So one of the first tasks I had to do as a conference chair was come up with my vision for the conference.
で、一番最初に委員長としてやらなければいけなかったことは、ビジョンを作ることです。
And after some thought, what I came up with was a 3-point statement focusing on community, sustainability, and spectacle.
で、考えたのが3つのポイントで、コミュニティとサステイナビリティ、持続性と、what's the last one?
Spectacle.
Spectacle.
No translation? I don't know. I'll explain.
ちょっと説明しますので、聞いてください。
So when I talk about community, what I want to have happen is to make sure that everyone comes to SIGGRAPH and feels like they're at home.
で、コミュニティというので、私が考えているのが、どんな方が来ても、シーグラフで、こう、帰ってきた、うちに帰ってきた、ホームっていうふうに感じられることを、考えています。
We are trying our best to foster an environment that is diverse and inclusive.
で、多様性と、なるべくいろんな人を包括的に、なるべく包括的にしたいということを考えております。
Doing this by having people from all walks of life on my conference committee, on our juries and review panels, on our subcommittees, and of course I hope that translates to our attendees as well.
で、それはもちろん、カンファレンスの委員長とか、その下で働いている人たちとか、もちろん、参加者の皆さんにも伝わるといいと思っております。
And as well as broadening our reach of what we are covering at the conference. We want to make sure that we are keeping up with the newest ideas and technology